And we're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford. Come right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our shows. And if you can, please give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, if you can like, share, subscribe, follow, or do anything that you can to support us right here at the Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Game Source, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break, of course, LakersBall.com, of course, Lakerholics.com, and of course, also as well, our good friends at the Hoopheads Podcast Network. Big shout out to our YouTube supporters out there. You've been so tremendous. I thought we'd go ahead live first to you today to go ahead as our way to say thank you. And to all the fathers and dads out there as we record this, I hope you've had the best of Father's Days as well. So truly wish everyone out there a happy Father's Day. Thank you so much. But for all of us Lakers fans, we can exhale now because the Boston Celtics did not get it done. They turned the ball over and over and over as they end up losing to the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. And that was a 4-2 split right there for you. So once again, congratulations to the Warriors on winning their NBA Finals. So thank you very much, because that allows them to go ahead and have number 7. Still need 10 more to catch up to us, which is fine. So that's fine. We'll go ahead and win number 18 long before they get to 17. So that's no problem indeed. But the question is now, as it turns to the offseason, NBA free agency, NBA draft, that's coming up later this week. NBA free agency later this month. The question now turns to what the Lakers can do with their team. And here today to talk about, first off, the NBA Finals, where everything stands, and the fact that ESPN, on its way too early prognostication and rankings, per se, the team rankings, has us with the Lakers at 17th. Is that fair? Is that too high? Is that too low? Or is that just right? So we're going to talk about that. Also, a new assistant coach hire. One leaves, one goes. So we'll talk about that as well. But here today to talk about what's going on in all of the rumors and surrounding things that goes on in Lakers fans out there. He's a good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check him out, as his articles are right there for you at Lakerholics.com. It is LakerTom. And LakerTom, I'm going to start off with the way too early rankings by ESPN that has the Lakers at 17th. Before I share any thoughts on it myself, what are your thoughts on ESPN's ranking of where the Lakers stand right now as it stands just before NBA draft and, of course, next week, the NBA free agency?
17 out of 30 teams. I think that's a little low, simply because we have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But I saw odds of 20-1, which probably seemed about right to me. There were a lot of teams, 18-1, 17-1, 15-1, 10-1, that were at least better teams at this point in time. The Lakers have a big job to do in this summer. They've made some terrific strides with respect to the coaching staff. I think they've done a terrific job in positioning themselves as best they could with respect to Russell Westbrook. They have half of Lakerholics.com convinced that Russell is really going to be coming back. So I don't know whether that really is going to make anybody have a better offer for it. But I think the Lakers are doing the right things. I thought that it was a significant situation that they allowed Darwin Ham to choose his own lead assistant, and it turned out not to be a guy who had coaching experience as a head coach in the NBA. And I like the fact that they were willing to hopefully understand that they made a mistake in how they brought Frank Vogel aboard and how they handicapped him. And they're now hopefully doing it in the right way. So I think that bodes well for hopefully doing the right things when we come to this summer. And we're a couple of weeks away from seeing what's going to happen with the draft and trades and free agency.
Well, let me ask you this, though, with Joe Soro here as well. But you say 17 is too low. Is that correct, LakerTom?
Yeah, I think that we're probably maybe 10th. And it's simply because there's just too much talent. This is the teams. People are acting and they enjoy the ability to act like the Lakers are a play-in team at best. Well, nobody knows who they're going to end up with. And there are lots of scenarios where we could end up with some very valuable players. There's also just as many scenarios where we could end up very similar to this year with a team that's got trouble. But, a lot of it will come down to health, and the health specifically of LeBron and AD. That's the wild card when you get it. Because they're injury prone and LeBron is old, our floor is pretty low, but by the same token, because they are who they are, if they're healthy and motivated, and the front office does a pretty good job of surrounding them with size, defense, and shooting, the three things that they really lacked last year, they could have a surprising year. And, LeBron and AD proved, 17 months ago that they could win it all.
Well, I do want to say, first off, Blue Magic, a big fan of yours who said some very complimentary things to you in the past couple weeks. He has a question for us, and we'll go ahead. As far as the rumors regarding Bradley Beal, I know that a lot of people are talking about a potential return for Russell Westbrook, at least his contract per se, over back to Washington. I know he's asking about it, so I know we can touch on that during the course of the episode. Before I hit up Joe real quick, you want to give us some quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, the Bradley Beal thing is interesting because I went through a complete analysis of how we could pull that trade off. And one of the things that I think is really important for the Lakers is to hard cap themselves so that they get, an additional $8 million in free agency. And free agency has a lot of players out there that are very valuable for the Lakers. But the Bradley Beal thing can actually happen. It would be Beal and KCP for Russell Westbrook, THT, and Kendrick Nunn, and the 2027 and 2029 first-round draft picks, probably unprotected, in order to make that deal. And the only way the deal will go through would be Bradley Beal would have to demand to be traded to the Lakers.
That would be the only way. I don't think
the
that's
only way it's going to happen. Now, what's interesting is first, Beal's never, ever said anything complimentary about coming to the Lakers or being a Kobe fan or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But he has just announced that he's made his decision where he wants to go.
Yeah,
he's
saw that
not telling anybody where it is. So who knows?
Mystery team.
There's one thing that helps the Lakers in that if he's looking for a place where he can win a championship on a team that doesn't have another dominant guard that he has to fight for the ball and touches, the Lakers are perfect because they need guards. They need a lead guard. He's only 30% three-point shooter. He's the ball. He can play off of the ball because he played with Westbrook. I don't like the idea. I think it's again putting yourself in a situation where you're spending all your money. I'd rather spend that money on a great roster than on a third star. But they are the Lakers, and throw the ball down the middle of the pit, and they cannot help but take a swing for a home run.
You know it indeed. I'm not going to deny on that one. Want to let you know while we go to Sean Grice and Joe Soro, LakerTom, you were on your computer mic and not on your regular mic, so we didn't hear your real sexy radio voice that you always have. So just want to let you know on that one. But also is here as well today. Good man indeed. It is one of the guys behind LakersBall.com. He is Ox1947. It is Joe Soro. Joe, great to have you here. Happy Father's Day to you as well. And once again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Thank you so much for joining us. Your thoughts on where the Lakers stand? I think 17 out of 30. I think that's a fair assessment right now where things stand before the draft, before free agency. So I think that's a fair assessment. Your thoughts first off, before we get into Bradley Beal, on 17 out of 30 where ESPN has them as of now.
Well, 17, you're looking at, based off the number, you're looking at them being out of the playoffs.
Well, they were out of the playoffs just
essentially, right?
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
I mean, I know we have a play-in now, but if they're going to be the 17th team, then it doesn't look good. I don't really care about the rankings, especially right now. I would have waited till after the free agency. Maybe
it's just for clicks.
I know. I get it. I just don't know how to assess this team until there's a There's
The
movement.
team.
Yeah.
Well, that's what
The team.
that's why I said, and Tom, you're still on your computer mic. For some reason it's not plugged in yet. But I do want to say again, when it comes to 17 on 30, that's based off of what happened to the Lakers at the end of their season, because they've not done anything yet to upgrade their roster. So we have to wait and see what happens, how they upgrade their
If it
roster.
was based off what they did this last year, I would figure it'd be worse, because they were abysmal. It was a non-chemistry just disaster. I'm not exaggerating this. This was the worst Laker team I've watched, and this includes the 94 and 05 team, because I've been watching the Lakers regularly with knowledge and maturity enough to know what's going on for 31 years now, since I was.
Would you say it's the most disappointing? Not the worst. Statistically, it's not the worst, but it's the most disappointing.
No, disappointing. I don't think disappointing. 2004 might be the most disappointing season. 2008 can be in there too, to a degree. I'd say pretty darn close, but 04. I don't. Kobe didn't play like Kobe in that final. I know Malone was hurt. I know Fox was hurt. I know Fish was playing on one leg, and Horace couldn't really play, and Slava was the starting four. But in my book, I look at it. If you're a favorite and you have Shaq and Kobe in their prime, you have to win that series. So that's probably that's the one that first comes to my head. So I'm going to roll with that. 04 was the most disappointing season as a fan, but the most just abhorrent season was this last year. And thank God Golden State won the series, because had they not, this would have been the worst Lakers season beyond words. I'm not concerned about this season anymore now. What happened last year is done.
Rear view mirror.
We've washed it. It's gone. And it would have been not washed had the Celtics won, because then we're still looking at 2 titles to pass them. And that would have just been devastating, at least from a sports standpoint. The Bradley Beal, I just read this today, by the way. I think I had read even one trade where they were talking about THT, Russell Westbrook, 27, 29, going to Washington for KCP, Kuzma, and Beal. But that didn't. Does that make sense to you guys?
Well, if it works out in the trade machine financially, but still the picks have to be involved.
Why would they? I couldn't figure out why they would do something like that.
Well, that's the thing, is us as Lakers fans like that.
Yeah, the Lakers, for example, would include players in that deal in order to get low enough so that they could get under the hard cap, so that they could expand their to get free agents.
So does Washington value the picks that much and THT to do that trade? I don't
think so. I think it's the start of the Lakers doing what is the natural thing that they want to do, which is to combine all of their assets into one little package and say, can we move Russell Westbrook, THT, and these 2 picks and get back the best player we can? So their first try is, let's shoot for the moon. Let's go for Bradley Beal. And then let's say maybe down the road, they're looking at Jeremy Grant, 2 draft picks. Can they get a Jeremy Grant in that deal plus get rid of Westbrook? Can they pick out the player that they want from another team? Anunoby, for example, he wants out of there, or is that enough to get Gary Trent Jr., who basically the Toronto may not want to pay and is going to want a big raise. So the Lakers are now trying to go onto the second stage, which is after they said, we're not going to use Westbrook in a trade we're not going to use picks in a trade for Westbrook. Now they've come back to say, we'll bundle all of this stuff together, with Westbrook, but you got to give us a good player. So I think they want to be in free agency during the trade talk to try to make a deal.
One thing we need to take from the finals as well is, while all the dead brain, blank brain people who just like to clown everybody. I clown the Celtics because I'm a Laker fan, but when you take that
That's
away,
always fun.
yeah, it's simply just Laker versus Celtic thing. But let's take that away for a second. We saw what depth can do. We saw what depth, which Golden State had versus the Celtics. Celtics did not have depth. And while everyone's sitting around and calling Jason Tatum a choker, a anti-Kobe and all this bleep, I'm watching the games and I'm going, we're witnessing more and more why it's important to have depth, because Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart are playing 40, 43 minutes a game. And I understand that they're in their prime and they're young and they're supposed to play those minutes. However, if you're going to have the Seattle Seahawks in 2013, where they're just turnstile of practically all pro guys coming off the bench versus somebody who's doesn't have that kind of depth, it's still going to catch up to you. And it did catch up to the Celtics. They could not play that kind of defense and still be effective on offense. That's why you see a lot of times in the NBA, LeBron is not playing D and well enough because of whatever reason that they conjured up in their mind, not realizing this guy's played 80,000 minutes of NBA basketball and is trying to preserve himself. You can't play Gary Payton defense for 42 minutes and be effective on offense. Hence, why was it difficult for even the great Michael Jordan after game 1 of the 91 finals to play up against a bigger player like Magic? Lakers ended up winning that game because of that. Well, what did Phil Jackson do? He adjusted. He went to Pippen guarding Magic, and it changed the series right there. I'm not saying you can't do it. We've seen Kobe, we've seen Michael Jordan do it, but to do it, those guys, people aren't Michael Jordan and Kobe. You also have to factor in these guys can't play crazy defense for 48 minutes and still be effective on offense, especially with an offense that's more ISO than kind of equal opportunity type offense. There's a lot of factors in this. And if you pay attention and if you understand the game and if you're not a moron and you're not just waiting to watch somebody screw up so you can go criticize them on your little keyboard, well, you'll understand that the reason why the Golden State Warriors won this series was they had talent, deep talent. Heck, a lot of their guys are even out and they still had enough depth, because you have Steph Curry missing 9 3-pointers in game 5, didn't make one freaking three-pointer, and they still won. How does that not explain that their depth was a big part of why they ended up winning this? Big part of why likely Steve Kerr is, at this point, you can't argue he's not a great coach. He's a great coach. And then on top of that, you have Clay, Steph, Draymond, who are the ultimate team players. And that is something you need to start giving appreciation to. We know Klay Thompson and Steph Curry are great players, but their team mentality, their willingness to give is something that we don't celebrate enough. And even the Celtics, to a degree, are the same way. It's just that they didn't have enough horses with them to go all the way. And I really believe if the Celtics had played any team other than the Warriors, we would be in hell right now. Had they played Phoenix, had they played Memphis, they would have beat those teams. I am sure of it. But that was the only team that could beat them, because you're watching them, man, and they're playing their butts off. And they were playing and woo. So what is that? How does that correlate with the Lakers in the future? Well, guys, we're going to have to worry about the Warriors, right? You're going to need depth. So it's not going to be just, let's go get Bradley Beal and throw away a couple of draft picks. They're going to need at least 2 to 3 more guys that are going to contribute in a huge way if they want to win another title.
Also here today to talk about what's going on with the Lakers. Good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check him out every time he's here at the Lakers Fast Break. It is the Magic Man, Sean Grice. Sean, great to have you here. Before I put us all on mute and give you the center stage. Your thoughts on where the Lakers stand on this way too early by ESPN? Yes, it's for clicks, and 17th to me right now, based off of the last season's performance, I think was fair. But I don't think the Lakers are going to stay there. I think they're going to make the changes. But will that make them go up or down in everyone's eyes? That's the question I have for you. Plus, is Bradley Beal truly an option for the team? And thanks again as well for joining us on this wonderful Father's Day out there. Truly appreciate it. But Sean, your thoughts right now, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me on again, Gerald. And I think 17 is. I'm in complete agreement with yourself. I think that's quite fair. I think if you slotted the Lakers on a list like this, anywhere from 12 to 20, you wouldn't find much of an argument from me. And again, they're just basing these results on the previous season. And for context, I'd like to give everybody a course in cognitive disassociation as far as ESPN is concerned. In May 2021, ESPN released a list of the top 10 players under 25. John Morant was not one of those 10 players. It was absurd at the time. They didn't obviously recognize their error enough to correct it. And it turns out he not only should have been vaulted to number one instead of one Zion Williamson, who decided not to even show up this year. He should have been included as a top 10 player in the NBA this year because he clearly was. So these lists tend to dip between cognitive impairment and, like you said, Gerald, for clicks. As far as Bradley Beal is concerned, I read the same tweet that Tom did, that he's made a decision on where he wants to go. And it's very interesting to me. Bradley Beal could have left college early, but he decided to come back for a year. And he came back and he won a national championship with the Florida Gators. And as much as Laker fans want to believe, and I'm one of them, obviously, who want to believe that we're kind of nibbling around the Wizards to see if he's available, there's another guy who's nibbling around too, and one Patrick Riley. I think he wants Bradley Beal in the worst way. Beal, Butler, and Bam, along with Kyle Lowry, you have a bunch of dogs there. And I'd put that 4, even with an older dog like Kyle Lowry, but that dog can still hunt. I'd put that 4 up against any other team the East has to throw at them.
I'm just going to tell you real quickly, though. Kyle Lowry, though, you got to limit his minutes because, as you saw in the playoffs, they paid the price.
Yeah, you can only play him maybe 20, 25 minutes a night in the regular season. If you really want to up the ante with him in the playoffs, I agree 100%. But again, I think Jimmy Butler's ability to be a facilitator, along with you have Gabe Vincent and Max Strus have made strides as far as offense is concerned. I just think Bradley Beal is a better fit in Miami than he would be with the Lakers. And on top of that, what concerns me is that he's been loyal to a dysfunctional organization. One of the most dysfunctional organizations that we've seen in sports, basically, in the last 30 years, the Washington Wizards. Yet he would go to the Lakers, who, while it looks like we've got some organizational structure with LeBron, there are still people still have doubts. And again, Gerald, it's what you said a few weeks ago. It just seems that the nepotism just casts a shadow over things eventually. Like the veil comes off, the emperor is naked, and that scares off some people. It's like Kobe said, right? Kobe, they asked him about free agency, and he said, "Look, man, if I have to convince a guy to come to the Lakers, he's not really the guy you want." So, to me, it like Bradley Beal doesn't feel like a fit at all. It
It's
doesn't
also
seem
about
like
optics.
it's reciprocated. Yeah.
I mean, right now, optics will have everybody wants to go to the Warriors or to the Heat or some team right now that's playing at or near the top of the contention right now in the NBA. The Lakers were pretty much pounced on by so many different players, individuals, press, Twitter, everybody with their season this season. So I will say that right now the optics aren't great, and the future has to go ahead and be made differently than what a lot of people are projecting it at right now.
I definitely, and it starts with trying to figure out if you're really interested in acquiring a Bradley Beal. Understand this as well. He's closer to the south side of 30 than he is to the north, and he's already had a bunch of knee issues. So you're also acquiring a player with a moderate injury history here. It's not extensive, but he does get hurt.
Definitely agree on that one. Thanks so much, Magic Man. As always, keep you on the line as well. Joe, great thoughts right there from Sean. I think he hit it right on the head. Your thoughts on that before we go and talk about some of the things that's going on with the coaching scene for the Lakers?
I agree that the Miami's likely the destination if he should leave. That's some of the feeling I get that's kind of a place he wants to go.
I think they have more assets as well.
They have more assets. And he would fit there. His game would fit there, and you could put Lowry at. You can convince Kyle to come off the bench, and he would. I'm sure he would be okay with it. We can't continue to be what all the teams used to be back in the 70s, where the Lakers were the ones taking advantage of their draft picks and picking first overall after winning a championship and getting James Worthy and things like that. If you don't stop with the giving away of your future, you're going to keep doing it. The only way you trade something like that for someone, it's got to be someone that's at least transcended or in their prime. And like if somebody said, "Hey, Jason Tatum wants to be a Laker, he's demanding it," at that point you could consider that. The reality of the Westbrook thing, the realistic reality is, if they don't want to give up draft assets, it's going to have to be contracts that they accumulate that other teams are trying to get rid of, that are probably 3 years in, or I should say 3 years left. So if there's a team out there that says, "Man, we could get rid of these two guys who have 3 years left on their contract for one guy who's making his money," and they're going to buy Westbrook out anyways. He won't be a problem on the team. I don't see how that team won't make that trade without demanding assets. Who's got a contract out there for $47 million? It's not a lot out there that have that number. So if a team wants to get rid of contracts that are beyond 2 years, the Lakers have an option there. The issue with that for the Lakers is what kind of asset are you getting? Are you getting guys that you're hoping they stay healthy? That you're hoping they're going to be contributors? Yeah. But the trade-off is, if you want to get something of value, you're going to have to give up your future again. I don't think you can do that. And if you bring Westbrook back, wait till it doesn't matter. If you wait till the deadline, it doesn't matter unless you sit him down. You're not going to, I don't believe you're going to convince him to sit on the bench. If you can do that, cool. But where's the talent? Who's going to replace him at that point? Who's going to replace $47 million on the team? No one, right? So they're in a very, very difficult, beyond even worse than what we're saying. They're in a really, really bad. They're really in a bad situation right now with Westbrook. And if they don't do anything, then I'm going to take it in as, you know what, guys, we're going to have to sacrifice the LeBron era here so that we don't kill ourselves. That way, a year from today, we will know that we will be out of this rut. We won't have to make this decision anymore. We still have Anthony Davis, and let's hope that he stays healthy for another 3 or 4 years, and we can kind of go from that. Can we want a title with LeBron? We got a title with LeBron. Okay, we wanted to win 2, maybe at least 2. Didn't happen. You got 1, but you can't sacrifice. You can't sacrifice based off what you saw this year. LeBron and AD could not figure out what was going on there, whether it was their health, chemistry. You can't. So I think if I had to make a bet, and I don't know how this is going to go at all. But if I had to make a bet, I would say they're not going to sacrifice big time and just eat this next year with Westbrook, start over next year.
I'm thinking that as well. Sean, real quick, but I know LakerTom's going to shake his head right there. He is, but I will go ahead and get him real quick. Sean, unmute yourself real quick and let us know your thoughts, and back to Joe, but then I'll get it over to LakerTom, I promise.
Yeah, Gerald, I just wanted to say I agree with you and Joe. And on top of it, I don't think trading Westbrook at the deadline is either practical or intelligent. It's very tenuous because you're trading that contract for maybe a good player or two and basically banking on them having insta chemistry with LeBron and Anthony Davis for about 20 to 25 games. That's too risky. Like that's just as risky as what Joe said, where you basically trade them and you're sacrificing 5 years for maybe 1.
You know, another thing I want to say about that, because we haven't really gotten into that detail, is sorry, Tom. I'll finish here, and then I'll let you talk. The teams that are going to want to drop contracts are obviously not happy with their talent, right? And sometimes talent works better elsewhere. But who are the Lakers going to get? Who are the 2 players, let's say, because $47 million is a lot of money. Max contracts are around, 25, 20? So you're going to be able to get 2 guys for that number. Who are the 2 guys? And this is something maybe we can't answer today, because I do need to kind of, now that you brought that up, MagicMan, I'm going to probably do some research on kind of which players we would probably be looking at if that happens. I have no idea. But who are those 2 guys that would come in and all of a sudden, oh, man, if they got those 2 guys, this thing's going to, it's going to be the Clyde Drexler in 95 thing. I have no idea. That's a good one. We're going to have to look into that.
The entire problem that the Lakers have is that it does not appear that LeBron James is going to agree to sign an extension and let them know that he's going to be there for 2 more years, which means that this is his last year. He can opt out next year. So I think that what you have to do is you have to say that it's almost impossible for us to become a champion overnight. What we have to do is we have to take a look at what we've got. And I think they're doing the right thing. I don't know whether or not what their end game is the same as my end game would be with respect to Westbrook, but I think that they're saying that we're not gonna give up a pick to move him. Okay. But they've already said now with this Russell Westbrook thing but what we will do is we'll package THT and Nunn and him and the picks together. But we want something special for that. And what they want is a sure player. They want somebody like Gary Trent Jr., 23 years old, near 40% three-point shooter, takes 8 of them a game and plays dogged great defense. And he's only 23 years old. You need a player like that. And so the whole trade thing of the whole scenario to me is to get one player like that and another good guy who's maybe just a rotation player. He's an 8. He'll fit in the top 8 on any team. You do that for the trade, and that's what you get for the trade. And then basically you don't take back a bunch of contracts because you only got 1 year of Westbrook. So you don't take back anything but expiring contracts. Because when you get rid of Westbrook at the end of that year, if you have to keep him, because you're not going to give a pick to him, then you have some cap space to use to get players in. But you got to get a second player in. And the way you get a second player in is you need that full MLE, that $10 million. That $10 million will get you Isaiah Hartenstein, for example. It'll get you probably, I think, Otto Porter Jr. It might get you Gary Payton too. But what you come out of that with is two players who fit everything that you want to do in your type of offense and defense that you want to run. And then the rest of them, you got the BAE, that's $4 million. But you got to clear enough cap space when you make this trade so that you're taking back like $16 million or less so that you can use that $14 million that you get in the MLE and the BAE. So what you can come out of that with is three good players, probably. Three players that are young, all under 30, all can play defense, all can shoot the ball, or have a valuable, Gary Payton's not going to be a three-point shooter, but his defense is worth it. So if you could land guys like that, and you focus on that, and either that's enough for LeBron or it's not enough for LeBron. Jeannie said she's not going to force the issue. They're not going to trade LeBron at the midway point of the year. And I also agree with Sean too that when you make a trade for somebody like Westbrook, you do it in the middle of the year. You do it in the middle of the year, it's a disaster because how you adjust the roster, the players that have got to go in and out. You want to do that in the summertime so that you can go into a camp and know what's going to happen. I think that if they don't trade Westbrook, and a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I think that it's even worth waving, stretching him. You just got to get rid of him one way or another because you need a clean slate. You can't have a rookie coach go in there trying to manage this guy. I think this is all just posturing. The Lakers will trade Westbrook with the 2 picks and with THT and none for the best two players they can get, with one of them at least being a young player like Trent Jr. Maybe a Gary Harris would work out. He's still 29 years old. Abbott, Anunoby, I love the idea of him. Jeremy Grant's another guy that you could get in that. But you get one guy that way from a trade, and you get 2 guys in free agency by hard capping yourself. Jeannie saves a lot of money because we only pay a little bit of luxury tax, But we then bring a bunch of players in that you can extend them, and you're in a great position to trade, at the trade deadline. You're in a great position to trade next summer because you're not just stuck with one guy on a contract. All of a sudden, you've got these other guys who are about 3 or 4 other guys who've got contracts that are between $10 and $20 million, so that you've got some pieces you can play with. But it's a 2-year project, really, to get back to a championship level because you can't do it. There's too many good teams. The Clippers are going to be so good next year. They're going to be dangerously good. I'm not worried about the Celtics. I'm worried about the Warriors and the Clippers. The Warriors are going to be better next year.
Don't sleep on the Mavs, Tom.
The
They
Lakers
have
have got to
Christian
raise the
Wood.
standard. You can't put together a team like the bubble team and win again. It's not going to happen.
Sean was saying, don't sleep on the Mavs. Obviously, don't sleep on the Suns as well.
Christian Wood was a perfect pickup for them. He solidified.
That's an interesting thing. Why do you think that the Lakers didn't? Because they inquired about Christian Wood last year, and they wanted to trade him, but they weren't willing to give a draft pick for him. Now, I don't think their draft pick was worth the same as the 27 this year. Even if it was unprotected, it's you were talking about a 15-year-old, 12-year-old kid now, I think, or something like that. Luka's going to have to be reckoned with when they fix that team. They still he really needs a point guard. We'll see what happens with that, but there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of really, and you can't just discount what's happening and with the Celtics, What happened to the Celtics basically is what you'd expect to happen when you got a team with the best 3 players have never been in the finals, and you're playing a team that's won 3 finals. It's not even fair. Go ahead, Sean.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you, Tom. You have me going here because that was a great point you just made, man. One pattern I've really noticed about the NBA and teams hiring coaches is when you look at the landscape right now, if you're a great X's and O's coach, you have a shelf life. Guys like Quinn Snyder and Brad Stevens, eventually they wane in a locker room. And what we're seeing now is that the leaders of a locker room are the coaches who end up surviving and then thriving. It's Steve Kerr, it's Eric Spoelstra, it's Nick Nurse. It's not just a requirement now to go with the X's and O's and put the Jimmys and the Joes in the right positions. You have to lead and command a locker room. And Joe is correct. I really think if you brought Russell Westbrook into that locker room with Darvin Ham, it would compromise that ability for him to show his true leadership and his ability to lead a group of men. Thanks, Tom.
Definitely great to hear your thoughts again, Sean.
Yeah,
Joe,
Drew Holiday and Russell Westbrook are two entirely different kinds of point guards. And I can't imagine, I can imagine him looking at AD and Giannis and say, we can do the same thing for AD that we did for Giannis, even though he's not a great three-point shooter. But to think that they can import that Milwaukee defense and have Russell Westbrook run the role that Drew Holiday runs on that team is lunatic, man. That's not going to happen. That's a stretch of imagination that's beyond reasonable comprehension. Seriously, I mean, what did you see Drew Holiday play? He's the best point guard defender in the league, period. And Russell Westbrook is probably the worst point guard defender. He wants him to be the tip of the spear for our defensive attack. Good Lord, help us.
you know
That
what?
has
It's
to
all,
be a position. That
Well,
cannot be reality.
it could, hopefully it will be something of that nature. Hopefully the Lakers will decide to make good decisions. But Joe, I know that you and I and Sean, we know that LakerTom's real serious. When he gets next to the camera like this, we know he's really serious. But before we head on out,
He's the face, you're the hand.
I am the hand indeed. Yes. 5 stars for you on your podcast outlets. But my friend, you're hearing the thoughts from both Sean and Tom out there. I mean, a lot of things have to happen. And I know that a lot of things have to start falling our way, or at least decisions have to be made. I am not a fan of the stretching. I love you, LakerTom, but the stretching, after just finally getting off of Deng's contract.
Would you rather have $40 million in 2 or 3 year contracts for guys who are perennially injured and definitely overpaid and may not be motivated, or I mean, we'd only have $15 million for 3 years. You could end up easily with let's say the kid from New York who used to be a Laker, who's got a 4-year contract for like $25 million a year. We could end up with him.
Julius Randle.
Julius Randle, you want Julius Randle for 4 years and $100 million, or 3 years at $15 million?
I like.
It's better than dead money for 3 years.
I like what you guys. This is probably one of the best shows we've done when it came to realistic options, and good solutions. Guys like Gary Trent Jr. Like, I call him Frankenstein just because it's easier to say. Hartenstein. When you have those little parts, it starts to remind me of when we had
something,
when we had, KCP, Caruso, Kuzma. You have that young talent. This is a young man's game. Gary Trent Jr. is going to be 24. That's like right at that sweet spot where you start to get really good. He's got a game that is made for a LeBron offense. So if you guys are going to start thinking that way, and we're able to, by osmosis, have the front office.
I think that's what they're thinking.
If they really are thinking that way, then they're going to be.
They may not get it, but that's what they're thinking.
If they're thinking that way, they are going to eventually get something like that. They may not get it.
They'll get somebody who's a young player rather than an over-the-hill, injury-prone guy. We don't need those guys. We'll get one of them just as filler because it's $47 million we got to cover, and you're going to get two guys that are making like $20 million. But we have to start somewhere, and the way to start is by not making any moves that are going to doom us if LeBron leaves in a year.
You mentioned Jeremy Grant. I wanted him last year, based off of what I saw when he was with Denver during the bubble. And just, again, youth, ability.
He can take over a game offensively.
The problem is he's going into his last.
Yeah.
He's also going into the last year of his contract, and I was initially thinking, would they want to do something to where they can kind of get rid of him and maybe Kelly Olynyk.
They just don't have anybody else. The problem is that they don't have anybody else on their roster who's got a contract that you can add up to it.
Yeah, you can't. Kelly only makes about 12 plus million.
I've tried to trade for Kelly. I've tried to trade for Jeremy and Kelly for a dozen times, and we don't have enough.
Well, you get a third team, Tom. This is the NBA. You don't need to be swapping with teams.
Right.
You can open it up.
A third team plus using less Westbrook's money.
But why would
all of the matching rules?
They're going to get a better deal for a guy that's making 20.
Well, I think Grant's out of our reach, But I do think that the Anunoby is a possibility. I think that Gary Trent Jr. is a possibility. Gary Harris is a possibility.
You get Gary Trent Jr., you solve two problems. One, you get someone who's got the skill set perfect for this team. The other thing is we don't have to deal with him anymore playing against them because that guy busts our ass every time we play him. So yeah, I was between realistic and unrealistic. I kind of thought that was an unrealistic thing. Now that you mentioned this,
but it's the two draft picks. That's the whole thing. It's two unprotected Laker draft picks that are post LeBron. I mean, they're not as good as a pick this year, that's for sure. But they are a pick when LeBron's going to be gone. 80 is going to be 33 years old.
You can't.
They're valuable. They're the only thing that we really can do to sweeten the deal. Otherwise,
you can't send those two picks unprotected. You have to at least do a top 8 or something. Because if you do and you fail, you destroy the next 5 to 7 years in case something doesn't happen. If AD was healthy, that's the key here. If I was guaranteed,
you can't play poker like you're scared.
True, but AD has an MO. He's got the MO of the second he gets a hangnail, he goes to the locker room.
Now I
understand. That. I would understand if he got injured like Steph did. It was a legitimate thing. He got injured, or Clay got injured. But
what do you mean? He legitimately got injured each time. The first time it wasn't his fault. The second time it was he's twisted his ankle.
But he's always had this problem, and he's always hurt in some way. You can't mortgage the future on a star player that you have that might not be available.
You can't give up on a guy who won you a championship. Just because of the last couple of years.
I want him to be AD, but I don't know. I don't know, and you can't risk. You can't. I don't want to look back on the 2027 draft or 2029 draft.
There's no way the Lakers are not. But it doesn't make any sense to talk about this, Joe, because the Lakers are not going to trade Anthony Davis or LeBron James. It's just not going to happen. The odds of that are so remote at this point in time.
That's where I think you're wrong. I think if the Lakers are a smart and intelligent organization.
Oh, wait a minute. You just disqualified yourself.
Hold on. I said if they are.
If
they are sitting around and they're actually discussing all options. Joe, you run a business. LakerTom, you've run businesses. I've actually run businesses. You actually look at all the options, and you have to ask yourself, is LeBron and AD still, after the type of months that they've had since they've won that championship, are they still, as a pair, as a duo, can they give you a full season on both ends of the floor, healthy enough to play 70 or so games to get you where you need to go? You have to ask yourself that question. And if the answer is maybe or no, you might have to look for all other alternatives. That's just something that's out there.
You can't be unrealistic and think that LeBron can't do that. It just physically, it's not fair, not right for a guy that's played that long. He needs to be managed a little bit here so we can have him here longer.
I don't disagree with that, but it's not. We're not going to trade him.
AD is the one that needs to be playing 35 minutes a game and being the defensive player of the year, MVP type. If we don't, all this stuff that we're talking about, if AD is not an MVP candidate this coming year, we're not winning a championship.
No.
LeBron is LeBron. LeBron is going to drop 25 points as of right now. He's going to play, let's say, 58 games. Okay? As long as he plays 58 games, drops 20, 25, 26 points, is LeBron James, that's good. But we need AD to be 25, 12, and 2.5, playing 70 games, hopefully 75, and being at least a MVP candidate and a deep defensive player of the year. If he does that, now all those other pieces that you bring in this offseason is going to become.
Well, no, if he doesn't do that, it doesn't matter what we bring in.
Well, I'm hoping that they will bring a good suggestion by King. He's hoping that they can get a center to protect the paint and help out AD. I agree with you. I'm hoping that they can get someone at the 5 position. I know we've talked about LakerTom has talked about that at length as far as a 5.
Hartenstein would be perfect, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody that can go ahead.
3-pointers.
Yeah, so he can stretch the floor and also protect the paint and help out AD and give you 20, 25 minutes good there. But also they need a little bit more depth, like Joe is talking about as well, when they go small, because as you know, in the playoffs, everybody goes small. They got to go as far as a lot of wing action. They go a lot of guard, perimeter action as well. So I know King has said McGee helped AD a lot in 2020. Absolutely, King. And thank you so much for watching. I agree with you as well that McGee was a great benefit, and the Dwight Howard combination at that time seemed to work for the Lakers as a number 5 position. But I think right now also as well, they need someone that can also stretch the floor. So I'm hoping that they will.
If that fits the Milwaukee offense that Darvin Ham is going to run.
Yeah.
So he desperately, he needs a center that it's going to be either AD at the 5 being the stretch 5 and hopefully shooting better with Jen aboard now, who is a guy that helped LeBron's shooting. And I think also LeBron is going to be our volume 3-point shooter. I don't have a doubt he's going to shoot. He's going to be among the top 5 players in the league in taking 3-point shots. We're going to shoot a lot of threes because Milwaukee does, and we're going to use a lot of corner threes. We're going to run a lot of plays to shoot threes from the corner. So it's an offense that really created great spacing for Giannis and Chris Middleton. So it should be a terrific benefit for LeBron and AD. But again, the whole thing gets screwed up if Russ is still here, because it just you can't then fix the defensive lapses and the lack of shooting that you have with LeBron, AD, and Russ on the floor. It's just such a disaster.
It could be a possibility, but again, stretching him to me should not be the answer. Just that's my opinion. I think
sit him down and trade him at the deadline, man.
I don't mind that. That's fine.
I'd take that.
I don't mind that at all. Again, but stretching him out, eating $15 million or a little bit over that for 3 years, that's kind of a tough pill to swallow for the team. We've, again, had to swallow $5 million for several years with Luol Deng. So, I think we need to stop stretching players.
Well,
yeah.
Luol Deng was 7 years. That's why it was so painful.
Yes, that's definitely.
That took a long time to get rid of because,
his contract his stretching of the contract was needed at the time, so
Yeah.
it ended up winning us a championship. So in the long run, it was not bad.
Hi, King. Just want to make sure to let you know, we talked about it earlier in the episode as far as Bradley Beal. We don't think that they will be able to go ahead and have enough assets to get Beal. Plus, Beal has already on Twitter announced that he's made a decision on which team he wants to go to. Hasn't mentioned which team it is, but he's already in his own mind has one team. We're still thinking the favorite is Miami. I think right now he could say Golden State because Golden State has a ton of assets as well. There are other teams out there which I think have more assets to offer. If he had an open, let's say, clause to just go to any team or competitive teams, or if he had a list or whatnot. But he has said on Twitter that he has only one team in mind. So in the next few hours or maybe days, we'll know what that is. But
does he have a player option, Gerald? Is that a player option that he has?
Yeah, because remember he's still on. I think he's on the Supermax or close to it because
so he could take it the year.
He was on an All NBA team.
But isn't he be a free agent?
I'm going to go ahead and check that on Sport Track real quick while you guys are talking about that. But I know King is also asking before we head on out about THT status, about trading him. What can we get back? So LakerTom, while I look up that for Bradley Beal's contract.
Right. I think the THT, it's kind of bounced back. You know, there was so much negativity that he had during the year about how he, just became an asset that, could have got Kyle Lowry last year and this year, and we couldn't trade him at the trade deadline. Just
to let you know, LakerTom, real quick, he has $36 million for this year, and he's an unrestricted free agent right now. Washington has, I know that can offer him a supermax because I believe he did appear on the All NBA team for the year he averaged.
He's a free agent now.
But no, he's a free agent in 23, just to let you know.
23.
Yeah, he's getting $36 million for this upcoming season. Okay. So he's going to go ahead and be an unrestricted free agent if he does not sign an extension. But if he gets traded in the next few days to the team of his choice, they're going to just go ahead and offer him. He's going to sign a huge extension at that point in time.
God, I hope it's. I think it would be terrible for the Lakers to do that. I mean, he's not Russell Westbrook, but my goodness.
He's on the wrong side of 30.
Really?
Sean said it best.
No, he's not. Doesn't fit the mold of what I think the team should be doing. So, but I do like the fact that they are now pairing the picks plus THD and Westbrook, because that's the only way we're going to get something good. You just got to put together all of your assets and say, what can I get for this? And then take a look at the list and make a decision. But we'll see. Any rate,
Well, once again, it is the Lakers Fast Break. It is, of course, Gerald Glassford, along with LakerTom from LakerHolics.com and also Joe Soro from LakersBall.com. Before we head on out, guys, and hopefully you guys can cut it down as fast as you can, but so we can get it close to an hour as possible. Again, thanks so much for watching and listening. But, Joe, before you head on out, tell us what's going on at LakersBall.com.
It's kind of tumbleweeding a little bit, because there's not a lot of activity. I'm fully expecting more activity in about 11 days. It gets hot and heavy then. Draft is okay, especially with us really not having a pick. Whether the Lakers buy a pick, I don't know. I'm assuming they probably will. I'm assuming they're probably going to try to use that as a filler, they've been pretty good at picking good players in the second round, so maybe they might see somebody that they think is worth paying some money for. But Lakers ball is very it's very attached to the activity around the NBA. So if the NBA's got a lot of stuff going on, or I should say Lakers stuff going on, it's hot and heavy. The second the Laker information starts to kind of dwindle away, the activity there is laxed. And, I always go back and forth on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. There's such a good community there that it hasn't gotten saturated with bozos, because we're even when some of us get out of line. Now, I haven't gotten out of line in a while, just because I started saying, you know what, I want to lead.
You notice he said in a while.
Yeah, I want to lead by example at this point. There's some leadership on the site, and I want to be a part of that. But, when someone starts to get kind of out of hand. They're pretty easy on them. It's not a Gestapo type reaction. But as you get more activity, you can't help it. If there's going to be more people, getting out of line, you're going to have to address it. So there's always this kind of balance on whether we want it to be really popular or do we want to just keep it steady and nice little community. And this community has been together for a long time. I was a part of the old community. It was called clublakers.com. I didn't frequent it a lot because at the time I was on another Lakers site. That Lakers site got so saturated it turned into a complete trough. I mean, just toilet bowl of people. And then, slowly I found Lakers ball, and I just like the way their site's set up, and I like the people that are there. And here we are, not too long after it. Well, it's been 4 or 5 years later. I never thought I'd be doing a Laker podcast, even though it's something I thought about doing before Gerald came on board and talked to us. But the inevitability of doing this was always, I always felt was there. And they're a big reason why. And they're just good people. And that's all you can ask for.
Once
good
again,
information. Yeah.
Good information indeed. And you go ahead and talk to Ox1947 today at LakersBall.com. Of course, there's also Lakerholics.com. Great conversations to be had there, and the great articles from our good friend, Mr. Jamie Sweet, and also LakerTom as well. So, LakerTom, do the hard pitch on Lakerholics.com before we head on out.
Well, I think we have a great site in a sense, and it's so totally different from what Joe does in his sort of forum mode, because we basically have a group of people who have been together. Most of them were expatriates from the LA Times Lakers blog that had just tremendous success for 2 or 3 years until it imploded and totally exploded with, as Joe said, when you get to a certain size, it just became unable to be able to control the content that was being thrown onto the site. And the LA Times decided to just cut the whole thing, and this was back when the Kamenetsky brothers and Eric Pincus were at various times the voice of the blog and so forth. So if you're interested in getting good conversations and having a lot of respect for your opinion and not being afraid to say something and have it wrong and so forth, I think you'll enjoy the conversation. One thing I think we do is we do a good job of curating the news, and so our thread of posts and so forth basically covers what I would call the more informed and intelligent aspect of the people that are talking about the Lakers. So I invite you to come aboard and join the conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm sure you'll learn a lot.
Yes, be part of the conversation today. If you're a great Lakers fan, there's no better place to go than 2 great places. I know, LakersBall.com, one of the chat groups there. You'll see Ox1947 all over the place. And, of course, the great articles and great conversations to be had at Lakerholics.com. Just want to mention to everyone out there, as far as what's coming up for this week, if the Lakers do anything good or notable or newsworthy, I will bring these guys back on for later this week. Right now, I have scheduled on Wednesday an NBA mock draft with our good friend that has appeared on the show before, Michael Weisenberg, a.k.a. Mikey V. He's going to be stopping by. We're going to do an NBA mock draft and talk about the NBA draft coming up. But if anything happens with the Lakers, they make a trade or they make an announcement, they make some picks that's worthy enough to go ahead and bring these guys back on the air, or at least go ahead and try and get them back on the air, I'm going to go ahead and give these guys a shout out, but they'll definitely be back this time next week. Want to thank so much everybody for watching and listening. I truly appreciate all the great comments that were out there. Maybe not so much by Rapslove, but sorry about Rapslove. Had to go ahead and, just kind of put you on the down low for a little bit with those comments. I understand that you're not a Lakers fan, but hey, you know what? That takes all for everybody out there to go ahead and appreciate what's going on in Lakers land. But you know what? We truly appreciate everyone out there that took their time out of their Father's Day to go ahead and check us out right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.